Luke Taylor.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure, as always. And also thank you to the honourable member for Sunderland Central for so capably introducing, but also to the petitioners, who are the very reason that we are here today. It's an incredibly simple petition that asks a very basic principle, that when bills are supported by MPs and the public, they have the time to complete all their stages in Parliament. We've heard a couple of quite extraordinary arguments against this today, which was a surprise. I won't now have to read, we won't hear a credible argument against that, which I think is still true. It is entirely possible to support the need for a reviewing upper chamber whilst believing that if there is significant popular will in favour of a piece of legislation, and if there is valid evidence in favour of its implementation, then the view of the Commons that a bill should at least be considered should ultimately prevail. Unfortunately, we're really here because that principle has not been applied to the terminally ill adults end-of-life bill. But let's just remember very quickly, at second reading, the bill was passed by 330 in favour to 275 against. At third reading, the bill was passed by 314 votes to 291. And as we've heard earlier, in terms of the public, specifically in May 2025, 73% of the public backed the bill after being told the specific eligibility criteria and key provisions of the bill that was passed at third reading. So it has to be accepted, even by its opponents, that this bill was indeed supported by MPs and it was supported by the public. At the time the petition was begun in February earlier this year, there was a hope that it would not be necessary, that the Lords would complete their scrutiny of the bill and that a stronger, improved bill would arrive back in the Commons for debate. Unfortunately, that was not to be. As the government response to the bill on the 26th of February made clear, the Parliament Acts of 1911 and 1949 established the principle as a cornerstone of a democratic process.
I wonder if the honourable member can clarify for me. He stated that amendments could have been, it could have come back to the Commons to be debated. A bill doesn't come back to the Commons to be debated after it's been to the House of Lords. All the Commons can do is considerations of the Lords. It cannot debate that bill again. So would you like to correct that?
We could have considered it, but we never got the chance because it was filibustered. It was spoken out. So, as with so much of our unwritten constitution, the ability of the principle to prevail when it comes to private members' bills that enjoy significant support relies on the good chaps and chapesses theory of government. A theory that Pete Hennessy described as an unwarranted faith that those who rise to high office will be good chaps and chapesses, knowing what the unwritten rules are and wanting to adhere to them, even if doing so might frustrate the attainment of their policy objectives. Clearly, this theory has spectacularly failed in this instance when you examine the amendments and speeches in the Lords. So when the bill fell, 1,280 amendments had been tabled. 7 of the most vocal opponents put forward nearly 700 amendments between them. So I do think it is worth looking at a couple of those who are most responsible for blocking this bill. Baroness Finlay of Llandaff, who tabled 169 amendments. Baroness Gray-Thompson, who tabled 131, including Amendment 458, which proposed, as we've heard, that every applicant must supply a negative pregnancy test, including men, people over 75 and those who are infertile. Lord Carlisle of Berriew, who tabled 72, Baroness Coffey, who tabled 72, including Amendment 15, which proposed excluding anyone who had left the UK in the previous 12 months, banning anyone who had been on holiday or received a 6-month terminally ill prognosis while abroad. Lord Sandhurst, 68 amendments, Lord Goodman of Wickham, 59, Lord Moylan, 46, including Amendment 236, which would have forbidden the coordinating doctor for the patient from ever being employed in any way at the same time as the process being followed by the NHS. None of these amendments were about making the bill better, or to improve safeguards, or to refine the bill. They were entirely to frustrate the will of MPs and the will of the public. In the same way Boris Johnson obliterated the good chaps theory in the Commons, these 7 members of the House of Lords have been most directly responsible for finally obliterating the good chaps theory in the Lords. As we've heard, constitutional expert Mark Darcy commented on the process as clearly being a filibuster. We've heard Rod Liddle, who was opposed to the bill, said his side won by cheating, and that opponents of the bill had used the machinery of government rather than honest debate to get the bill booted out. Lord Moylan's, who tabled 46 amendments, openly posted on Twitter that peers are justified in blocking the assisted dying bill, but also shared a Times editorial saying that peers who want to continue blocking this bill and prevent it from ever becoming law are justified in doing so. Clearly a reference to the use of amendments and speeches to block the bill. So, my speech thus far is focused on the process, but I do think it's important to mention the real human costs of those who are faced with one of the most heartbreaking decisions possible at their most vulnerable time. And like with so many other private members' bills in our long and proud history, the human story that hides behind the constitutional fray that we've been arguing today can get lost. But once it reaches the statute book, the net gain in the quality of life of those it affects shines through. It was the same for the right to an abortion, the right to love who you love, the right to marry who you love, and now the right to make the most fundamental exercise of individual will and liberty imaginable. This is a debate about hope, about choice, and about taking control of the end of your own life, and that hope and choice that have been taken away by a tiny number of unelected legislators who have willfully tested the good chap's theory to destruction. We must take every opportunity we can to ensure that it is not allowed to go unchecked and its lessons go unlearnt, and most crucially of all, that the chance to alleviate the suffering that this bill would offer is not lost for another generation.